Welcome, welcome as people are filtering in. We are going to get started in just 2 minutes. So get settled in, get your popcorn. Not that instructional design is necessarily a popcorn worthy. Well, I won't be a judge. Alex, do you think instructional design is popcorn worthy?
Um, I don't, if what we mean by popcorn worthy is like I'm watching a train wreck and enjoying it very much, I'd like to think no. But if what we mean is like it's a blockbuster, it's definitely that. So,
Definitely a blockbuster. All right, we're going to get started in about a minute. So just settle in and then we'll run over some logistics and then dive in as we're going. Yeah, place to take notes to remind myself of things. All right, let us go ahead and dive into some logistics, some introductions and such as people are settling in. So some of you will know me, some of you will not, because it kind of looks like this webinar is a mixture of about half people who are already using Harmonize, so have probably met me, and the other half who have not. So the folks I have here today, I'm Marcus. I'm one of the owners of Harmonize. I have with me Alex, who's an instructional designer, and I have with me David, who does some of our training webinars, some of our teaching specific webinars, and also handles towards the end anything that's sales related. But today's webinar is not about Harmonize specifically. What we are going to go through is a whole bunch of ways to make your assessments more AI resilient. Not proof, because there is no such thing, but AI resilient. So from a logistics standpoint, we are going to be recording this. Alex was, and enough people are interested in this, and Alex has agreed to turn this into a bit of a blog post. So if you prefer the content in written format, we will get that out in the days to come. And you're welcome to participate. Throw your questions out in the chat. David is going to be monitoring the chat for us. Alex and I are going to be covering content. You can also, if you throw your questions out in chat and we don't see them, you can do the raise hand icon and we will either, if you want to ask your question in voice, you're welcome to. There will probably be about 50 or 60 people in the webinar, so we probably will stay away from voice to some degree. But if we're getting towards the end and there's time, we definitely can shift into that mode. All right, so diving a little more into content. I actually accidentally called this two separate things and caused a couple of confusions for folks. The real content here is AI resilient, I should say, assessments. Like how do we take assessments that we have, how do we modify them in a way that it's at least more difficult for AI to answer, that we're really getting into, are we assessing the student learning? And the content that we're pulling from this is that Alex and I both do tons of, well, David as well, tons of training with instructors who are using Harmonize and are trying to figure out how to change their assessments, change their discussions, change whatever it is to be not just text only. So we've spent a lot of time out there talking to folks about this. So we're going to take all that information and we're going to now, we've organized it and we're going to bring it back out to you. I will be demoing these things in Harmonize, but we're not going to really talk about how to do them in Harmonize. For those Harmonize users who are in there in the session, Alex will be throwing out some links to our help center, like of how did I do that in Harmonize type of thing, so that we are not dragging people into what is Harmonize land. We're staying more focused on the assessment side. If you do have follow-up questions as you're trying to get this stuff to work in Harmonize as well, you can reach out to us at support@harmonizelearning.com, and we will happy to jump on a call and field that. So now into assessment land. I think the underlying thing that has come out of this, and I'm a bit of a science fiction fantasy geek, but so if you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, journey before destination is what we're trying to assess here, or sometimes people call it process over product. How do we take our existing assessments that we're accustomed to just grading the final thing that a student has produced? How do we just take a couple steps back from that and really document how did the student get from point A to point B? How did they critically think about what they were trying to do? Can we document that along the way so that we are seeing more depth of what is the student actually thinking? How are they achieving what they're achieving? Because the thing that I'm guessing a lot of people have played with AI and are familiar with is it crushes text. So if you're just asking for an end product that is text, ChatGPT can do that. And I'm not even going to talk about AI detection in this session because it is not reliable and also puts you into a police mode, which is very uncomfortable and very complicated and very nuanced. So instead, we're not talking about that at all. It's going to talk about how do we change assessments to help sort of sidestep some of the fact that text can be written very, very quickly by AI. Alex, does that seem like a fair top-level summary before we dive into things?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to walk through a bunch of different assessment types that we talk about with instructors, how we talk about modifying them. I'm not going to tell you this is how to do it. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of ideas that have been discussed in all of these brainstorming sessions we have with instructors, with instructional designers. My hope is that you take some of these away as like, here's a way I could change. If you're an instructor, here's a way I can change a little bit one of my assignments to make it a little more resilient. Or if you're an instructional designer, this helps you brainstorm and re-engage with a lot of the practices that you've learned throughout the years. Everything that I show you today, the goal, and you're welcome to challenges on this, is something that is pedagogically sound. Like it's a good learning practice. We're not doing this just because we're trying to sidestep AI. It has value in and of itself. So we're not just adding work for the sake of work. We're not just adding work to sidestep AI. We're talking about things that are better for the students, but also kind of help us deviate away from purely text written stuff. All right. I'm going to jump into a couple here. I'm going to start with the essay because so much of stuff is assessed in an essay that it's really a question of like, I don't want to completely throw out essay writing because that would throw out so much of higher ed and how we assess things that we don't want to do that. So we're going to start with the essay and talk about how we can add on or tack on to our essay assessments so that you can delve deeper into what the student is doing. Like I said, I'm going to demo this in Harmonize, but you'll be able to just to demonstrate the concept. So starting with essay, traditionally we turn in the essay, it's a Word doc, it gets assessed, full stop. What we'd like to think about instead is how did the student get to that end essay? And let's actually have the student document some of that. And when possible, have them document that in a way that is not digitally typed text, because they can have ChatGPT even document the process and make up steps along the process along the way, which is not critical thinking. That's just filler, again, them complying. And so when you think about it, like you start with an essay, there's brainstorming steps, there's research, there is outlining, there's drafting, there's actually reflecting on the learning process after the fact. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff we want students to do when they're thinking about writing an essay. If we can get them to document one or two of those, you choose which ones you think are most important to what you're trying to achieve. Then we have an additional artifact in the assessment where we can see the final product and hopefully we can see how they got there. And hopefully the see how they got there was done in a way that's not easily accomplished by ChatGPT. And Alex, this is when I get into these, jump into these, because you're a former English teacher. And so there's going to be nuance to this that you have that I don't. But I pulled up an example here where I started with the idea of a mind map. We're trying to get people to connect ideas together. I brought in a digital mind map, which is currently a little difficult for AI to do, although probably soon won't be. There's probably tools that are coming out to do this. But I also did a basic mind map on paper and took a picture of it and attached it to what I was doing before I actually then turned in an essay. And this essay was actually written by Alex that she kindly gave to me to include here. But now I'm including the essay. When instructors are talking about grading these, a lot of times you're still just reading and assessing the essay, right? But if you have doubts or you have concerns or you think maybe the student didn't fully write this on their own, you have these artifacts that you can delve into and ask questions about that demonstrate how the student got from point A to point B. And so in this example, I went one step further if they wrote the essay, but I also asked them to talk about the essay and what was hard about it. Like, where did you struggle? What was easy? Like, reflect on the essay writing process now that you're done. That's like great retrieval practice. It's great sort of getting the brain back into what you were actually writing. I did that with our screen share thing. You could have them do this in a Google Doc where they're commenting on the Google Doc and talking about the learning process. You could have them open up Google Meets and record it or do whatever screen sharing thing they want to do. But the idea is like record a video of you looking at your own essay and reflecting on what was difficult about it as you're going through. And then I, as the instructor, can step in and critique these things. Maybe I draw on your mind map. Maybe I comment on your particular essay summary, whatever it is. We have some more powerful tools than a lot of places do, but you can still get at this idea of like the students are documenting the process, turning in the final thing, maybe reflecting on the process, and you are responding to whatever parts of those are meaningful to you as the instructor. We often talk with instructors and we're like, you don't even have to necessarily watch all of these if the thing is clearly written by the student because you recognize their voice, you recognize their mistakes that they've made in earlier essays. Just critique the essay as you would traditionally. These are additional things that help you dig deeper into what the student's doing as well.
I'll jump in though, Marcus, and say, like, listening to them is great. I used to have my students record videos like this before AI was even a thing. And I think it's so great for them to reflect on their own learning, but it also would help me to listen before I went and graded their essays because I would know how they were feeling about their essays. Like, um, I would know if they felt like they had written the world's best essay, or I would know if they felt like really underconfident and like really bad about it, or like what parts they felt confident in, or and like it actually like helped so much when I needed to give them feedback because I knew like where like what mindset that feedback was going to be going to. So I think these are one of those things, like so much of what you've discussed already, that it's like, yeah, it's a chat GPT deterrent, but it's also just a really good practice that's going to be great, I think, for students and teachers.
I'm curious, do you feel like the time trade-off was actually beneficial because if they talked about how much they struggled?
Yes, and this maybe depends on, this is going to vary from teacher to teacher, but it was particularly beneficial. Like maybe if you don't want to do it for every single student, if you read a paper where you're like, ooh, this really didn't hit the mark, I think it gets particularly beneficial to listen because, yeah, then you want to know how that student was feeling and thinking about it before you frame that critique that's maybe going to be a little more negative and you can think about it. Like I think it was really
All
helpful
student
for
work
me.
is great student work, Alex.
Well, well, in the sense that everything is growing towards something better, yes. But I think it's always good to know like what your students are thinking and feeling as you critique writing because it's so personal. So anyway, I'm taking us down a rabbit hole.
That's okay. So a question came in the chat. We are recording the session, so David will share it out. It'll take us maybe till tomorrow to get the recording put together and everything. But okay, so that was essays. I'm going to have Alex throw out a link. A lot of people don't know, for those that are Harmonize users in the room, you can use Harmonize to do private assignments that are not discussions. Most people think of Harmonize as the discussion or group platform. She'll throw out a link to be able to how to do this. So if you're wanting to delve into this as a Harmonize user, you can to see how to configure that. And we're making that process more thorough and easy in the upcoming month or so. So that was starting with text. That was that we already have an essay assessment. We already are working through this. How do we just document some pieces of that process along the way? And think about your student workload. Like, don't think that you have to have them document the entire process because that can be quite onerous. I mean, if it's a super important essay, then sure. But you're really just trying to hit whatever you think as the instructor are the key points you'd love to see when you're going through things. Okay, so now taking one step further, if the writing itself wasn't the object, but it was demonstrating knowledge through an essay, you can pivot and have students do that in a way that are not written at all. Do video essays, etc. And so that's the next example. Like if the goal wasn't writing, like if the goal's writing, you have to do writing, right? And it's important to teach writing. We're not throwing that out with the whole AI world. Students need to know how to write. But well, we can have that argument if you want later. But if we're trying to get them to demonstrate knowledge, how do we get them to do that in a way that just is not easily done by AI? And the answer to that is don't do it in text, or at least do it in a combination of text and artifacts of another sort. In this case, it was a pure video essay coupled with a PowerPoint presentation I put together. So an overview of what I was thinking as I was rolling into it, what my goals are, and then an actual PowerPoint presentation where I demonstrated my knowledge through PowerPoint and actually verbally gave the presentation. This is great because it demonstrates knowledge in a way that's not easy for AI, but it's also great because you're building skills for out in the workforce of, generally speaking, like if I'm doing things, I'm doing them with PowerPoints, I'm doing them with verbal presentations and Zoom meetings and such like that. So you're building really good skills from presentation and oral presentation as well. So if you can step out of this mode to be able to say, okay, what is it that I want to say about the particular student's slide deck. Can you critique their slide deck? Can you critique the actual PowerPoint file that they uploaded if you wanted, whatever it is? So if you have the opportunity to leave text behind because writing's not the thing, I would say do that. It'll be a more probably engaging for your students to see each other's work because frankly, there's a lot of reading involved in higher ed, and that's not always how students consume information in the modern day. So if they are expressing themselves in non-written format and consuming information in non-written format, as long as you're keeping it accessible, make sure your videos are auto captioned and such like that. You can work through doing this as an example. Great UDL principles, if you're familiar with Universal Design for Learning. It doesn't have to be about consuming and writing text. It can be consuming and writing, consuming and producing any type of information. So you're actually supporting different expressions when you're doing that as well. So added bonus there as you go through. Christopher asked, how did I record the PowerPoint presentation? Harmonize has built in for that. Alex can throw out the article on the screen share. If not, there's a bunch of software that's free that you can do this. Loom does this to be able to screen share. Vimeo actually can do free screen share as well. It's a two-step process because you have to send them to go find the tool to do it. So there's a little bit of a support headache in that front, but students are quite savvy. And they need to know how to record videos and screen share just as they're growing into their adult life as well. So, if they have a Google Meet or a free Zoom account, they can go ahead and do that as well and just present that way in addition. So, and then they can bring it in. And yeah, we auto caption everything. So back to that, make sure whatever platform you're using captions, because otherwise, especially with some of the changes coming down and well, hopefully the changes continue to come down, you'll have stricter requirements for captioning for content as well. So make sure you are keeping it accessible when you push in some of these directions. Okay, Alex, any thoughts on video essay stuff? I'm getting close to your content and I'll turn it over to you, but I have one more to go through.
Yeah, I was just going to say I did drop a link in the chat to the webinar we did that was specifically about combating ChatGPT with multimodal assignments. But like much like with some of the stuff you were saying about scaffolding and essay writing, one of the things I love about the multimodal assignments is that they are also just a good learning practice. This is a good like universal design for learning to invite students to express themselves in different modalities. So I think that's and it's fun for them too to have something that's not just text. So
depends
I
on
think
the
these are
content that they're having to present on. I never found
that's
accounting
true.
fun.
That's
I
true.
just, full disclosure, sorry for any accounting professors out there, not my thing. But yes, it can make it more engaging. That is true. All right, I'm going to spend one more thing in this assignment. So, we've talked about how to sort of sidestep the AI process, and we talked about documenting that journey along the way. You can take it one step further and incorporate AI into the process. Just make sure you're documenting, you're giving them guidelines on what's okay, but you're also documenting what it is they want to do. Most of the AI platforms have a way to share a link of the actual chat conversation that they had. So if they are working towards creating an essay and you said, hey, I want you to brainstorm connections between different subjects, and once you have those connections placed, pivot, now go write the essay. You can have them include the brainstorming session that they did with ChatGPT or the other AI platforms to be able to then you can jump directly to it and see what did they ask AI to do. You can see the conversation that they had with AI. This is obviously a step further than a lot of people are comfortable with, because once you open that can of worms, not that it's not already open, but it's something that you then have to manage because you're going to get questions around what's okay and what's not and dealing with the anxiety of it. So proceed with caution in this one, but I think this is one step further if you are thinking about including AI directly in there. In this case, it was me to be able to figure out how to actually do course design and create an outline. So then I would turn around and document the outline, and then I included that outline as a PDF as part of what I was going as I'm working my way through the assignment. So same rules apply. If you are embracing AI with it, have them document what they did along the way so that you can dig into it if you need to as well. All right. Go back into the modules. I'm doing all this in Canvas just because that's where I'm most comfortable. Most of your LMSs are going to have the ability to do a lot of this stuff as well. We're uploading videos, uploading images, PDFs, and assignments, and those types of things. I'm just in Canvas because that's where I'm comfortable. All right, let's talk about now if we're actually analyzing text. So we have a very traditional mechanism where we're like, read this and then write about it. Alex's essay that she gave me was a poem, an analysis of a poem. You can actually move that analysis inside of the document. And there's a lot of tools that do this for you, to where you can actually have the poem directly inside of the LMS and or at least in a browser window. And you can have your students, having a whole sidebar conversation where they are highlighting parts of the actual written content and having a conversation about it. AI can support them in that, but AI is not going to do this for them because AI, at least not yet, can't go in, navigate the document easily, highlight sections of it, manipulate it, and comment on it. So in this case, it was analyzing a poem. We actually had them add their comments directly into the poem versus read the poem and then go talk about it in a discussion forum in written text, because once again, those two steps are easy for AI to accomplish, more difficult here for them to think about it this way. This can be done in Google Docs, free, can be done in Hypothesis and Perusal are the main two competitors to us in this space of document annotation, to be able to put those docs inside of your LMS. If you're a Microsoft school, Microsoft, some of the online Microsoft tools allow this. So there's a bunch of tools to be able to accomplish this. Some of them are outside the LMS, some of them are in, but this is something that if you think about, there's a lot of research that shows if I am accomplishing a task and interacting with my peers, when I am reading the document, the comprehension of that document goes up 10+% in terms of comprehension. There's this framework out of ASU called ICAP framework for talking about that interactivity and how it can aid in comprehension. I'm doing this with a poem. You could do this with a case study. You could do it with a research article. You could do it with a legal contract. You can do it with a historical document, those types of things. Move the conversation inside the doc, and you can assess these. A lot of these are gradable, like Hypothesis, Perusal, and Us. You can automatically hook up to the gradebook. The Google Doc thing, you would have to have them comment in the doc, and then you'd have to grade manually somehow. So a little more painful there, but creating this type of interactivity inside the document does wonders for learning comprehension, but also, once again, naturally sidestepping that. And Alex, you love social annotations. Do you have things you want to add about?
I do. There was one thing I was going to add, particularly on the topic of how you can use this maybe um, to be a slight GPT deterrent. I've heard of some instructors having their students reference other students' annotations in their essays and essentially use the conversation that was had in the annotations as like almost the critical background against which their arguments are framed, which is so cool for multiple reasons. One, it's a chat GPT deterrent because chat GPT does not know what all these people discussed. Two, it actually like it's hard sometimes for students to enter, there's like 100-year-long critical conversation around this poem, and it's hard for students to enter that conversation and make a meaningful intervention in it. But they can practice that skill of like, I'm positioning my argument against an existing conversation and making an intervention in it. They can do that same move much more easily with their classmates' comments. And so it's helping them build that skill of like understanding an academic conversation and entering it, but in a way that's like much more at their current level and that ChatGPT is not going to do for them. So that's kind of like a fun next level thing you can do with this.
I'm going to put a little asterisk next to every time we say ChatGPT can't do that. We're always going to say yet, because just so you're aware, like ChatGPT just released a thing called Operator that can actually navigate the LMS and find assignments, read the assignment, figure out how to submit the assignment, submit the assignment. So a lot of this stuff is for now. It's great. It's good learning practice. But it's moving so quickly. I just want to put that asterisk next to it of like 6 months from now, this may not be true, but we're doing the best we can in the world we live in right now as we go into it. All right. Peer review. This one is you, Alex. This is more your jam. Do you want me to just open this straight up in SpeedGrader? Is that correct?
I think just opening it, I don't think we actually need the speed grader view. I think we can open up and maybe just jump to James's post. That's what I did with the sample essay. So I set up this sample peer review assignment, and this is a pretty straightforward peer review assignment where James posts an essay and then his peers critique it. One of the things we know about students and all kinds of plagiarism, whether it involves AI or not, is that they're more likely to do it when there's some big assignment that they do at the very last minute and it's not like broken down into pieces. So like writing a draft and getting peer review, like these are good things that sort of chunk up the process, so that they're less inclined to want to turn to some of those quick solutions at the last minute. So this is like a very old school plagiarism deterrent. Some things I'd add here too, like you can chunk it down like further, like you can make it smaller. You can have them start by, peer reviewing, submitting and peer reviewing thesis statements, drafting and submitting and peer reviewing an introductory paragraph. Like anything that makes it easier to do in chunks is going to help them. And then I think one of these comments too shows someone commenting in video form. Maybe not. Maybe not this one. Oh, James did it for someone else. So the other thing you can do is have, yeah, here. So here's where James left a comment on Nick's paper, but included a video. It's me, it's not really James. You probably didn't know that, but I'll give it away. Um, but you can ask,
You look just like James's profile photo. They wouldn't have noticed.
no one would have known. But asking your students not just to write to each other, but to talk. So like yes, have them write because students need to write, but like have them not only talk about their own papers, but talk about each other's papers. And I think this is one of those practices that has a double benefit because students can sometimes be like too critical during peer review. And like when everyone is talking to each other and seeing each other, we're remembering that we're real humans and we're more likely to have a constructive conversation about the draft rather than just a like, here's everything I think you did wrong. And then I, the draft writer, feel hurt. Instead, we can have a conversation together about what we can do to make the draft better. So
If I remember right, you actually set up a rubric that told them to be nice to each other. Is that correct?
I did. I set up a rubric that told them to be nice. So the
Okay.
first four criteria on this rubric are for the essay itself. It's reminding them what they need to do on the essay, but then there are two peer review criteria that are reminding them to be specific, to provide evidence from the draft, and then, yeah, to be constructive, to make specific suggestions, but in a positive, constructive manner.
Um,
So,
For those that are using Harmonize, real quick, we set this one up as a standard one post, two comment, multiple due date discussion. Alex actually turned on the AI coach to help the students see if they were doing quality peer review. So if she can throw out some links of what that means. For those that are also Harmonize users, we are actually building formalized peer review into the product for release this summer. So if you are a fan of peer review, stay tuned for that. We will actually manage that process for you. In the words we've been told of people we reviewed, way easier than the LMSs do. That's our goal anyway. So if you think about peer review, we have some support for that coming out that's even more formal than what's there now. The thing I love about this is that the more you get students interacting with each other, there is peer pressure not to just phone it in with AI as well. So the psychological side of things can help to some degree, because to be honest, like I think Alex, she used she used AI to write the assessment. She used AI to write the rubric. Well, no, did you use AI to write the essay?
the essay prompt and the essay by James are mine. And it's interesting. I'll tell you, the plagiarism detection and the AI detection did not trigger on the essay I actually wrote. And
Did
so
it
I
did on
am
this
not
one.
AI. That one I did not write. That one is AI. And it came plagiarized. It's triggering the plagiarism one too, because I think I submitted it for two different students. But yeah. Um yeah, so like the essays themselves can be written with AI. The other thing I'll say about that too, though, this particular essay assignment is somewhat like it calls for them to closely analyze the language of the text to make a non-obvious argument about the speaker and blah blah blah. And if you actually dug in and read these, I don't think the AI written ones they would not do. They would be mediocre, right? Um, if you give your students an assignment that requires really good analysis and critical thinking and argumentation skills, the AI is not going to be able, it might be able to do okay, but it's not going to be able to hit it out of the park. And so like we're all familiar with this, but like actually requiring like depth and close analysis, especially if you give them it probably did a little better with these because these poems are out in the ether. But if you ask your students to write on like poems and texts that are not as like commonly out there and written about, this is another good strategy too.
AI
Um,
written poetry and then critiquing that. Um, the thing I'll
I-
say on this, the same thing that applies to essays applies here. Document the process. Take a picture of your notes. As you were reading the student's work, you were probably, well, maybe if you're like me, you were writing on a piece of paper. Take a picture of that so that they can see what the notes are. Students are going to be spending the time reading each other's notes and reading each other's artifacts because they're handling the peer critique, and really you're just kind of watching the process and then jumping in where you need to. So you're not shouldering the burden of looking at all these artifacts. In this particular case, you're asking your students to do it. Then they see demonstration of process at different levels from different students, so they can also not just learn by in the end product and critiquing it, but they can see how the student got there as well. So the same things that Alex was talking about that were a plus of like hearing the students where they struggled, have them do that reflection here as well. Their other students will watch it, and it adds some more humanity to it as well, some more connectivity to each other as they're going into it. Anything else on peer review, Alex?
No, I think that covers it. Do you want
Okay.
to move on to group projects? Is that where we are?
I'm going to go into private
Private,
journals
private
first.
journals, that's it.
So another super valuable thing. So private journal, private reflection spaces, private process areas, basically throughout the semester, having checkpoints where students are following some sort of process of reflection. Because if they are just churning out content written by AI, but yet they know they're going to have to reflect on it, maybe not as part of that assignment, but by the Friday around how it went. I've actually set this one up as a private space where I've actually asked them to do private reflection. There's a reflection cycle called Gibbs reflection cycle. There's a bunch of these out there to where it's basically like giving them some structure of what you actually want them to do, as well as going back and reflecting on their reflection. Sounds a little meta. But you can see I set this one up as one post followed by one post and one comment, followed by one post and one comment. Their job every week is to post on the learning and to go back to the previous post and comment on what changed about what their perceptions were last week versus this. Because we are lacing this reflection throughout the course, it's inherently part of what they're doing, and they're making it personal. You can actually ask them to tie it to their personal life, real world experiences, those types of things as well. And have them do it. I did it in text because I was throwing together some stuff quickly for this demo, but it could be done in video essay. It could be done in different artifacts as well. And that's really more about the student thinking about the work as you go. Gives you another touch point to see how deeply are they reflecting on what they're learning as well. So this is kind of taking what was the reflection of that essay that I made as part of the initial essay submission, breaking it out into its own space. We do this in Harmonize with a private entry. I know D2L has its own private journal. I'm not sure if Canvas and Blackboard and Moodle do. They probably, if you weren't using Harmonize, you probably would have to do that as an assignment where they are submitting their reflections as an assignment on a week-to-week basis. So it wouldn't necessarily be a blog space where they can see and reflect on their different things. It would be different assignments, but it's still accomplishable to be able to do. And so it's a great practice for both reflection, but also retrieval of whatever was being done this past week. Having to come back in and remember those things. I forgot them, I've remembered them. That sort of forgetting and storing and retrieving and such is really good from a learning perspective as well. Right. Some other cases of things. Oh, this one is, so this hat tip to one of our instructors from, I think it's from UAB, isn't that right, David? Is that where Stephanie's from?
Yeah, UAB.
Okay, so this is from a webinar that David ran with Stephanie. We pulled it in just because it was a great example of documenting work in a non-digital format to where they are actually doing their work longhand, which is great for working things out and seeing scratches and notes and whoever's handwriting this is. I'm a little jealous of because that's not what my handwriting looks like. But they're taking pictures of it. They're talking about their strategies for doing things. David recorded an audio for it. Looks like we set up a couple video responses. People drew on those images. You can grab those images. If you're on a Mac, there's built-in tools to draw on images, or you may have to go in Windows, you may have to go into a different program to do it. Stuff's built in Harmonize, but the idea is like we had something that AI couldn't easily do. We can see the work here, and then we can critique that work as we're going through it all. So it's not something that was done in a math quiz, because frankly, remember ChatGPT released the thing that can use your browser now called Operator. It can go take a math quiz and get it way righter than many of your students can. And so this is something about we're digging into the strategies, we're digging into the thinking process, we're seeing the mistakes, we're able to critique those artifacts as well in a non-digital way. This was just a great example of we have so many people talk about how do I have math discussions online. David did a great math webinar with Stephanie and kind of instructional designer named Brian from George Mason. And I don't know if you guys want to grab that and put it out, but people love that webinar because it was about how do we have discussions about math online. But I also brought it up here because Alex was like, this is a great example of not doing purely digital written text and or quizzes and such.
Yeah, and I think this is a good one because a lot of the conversation around AI deterrence centers, like for good reason, on writing. But AI has gotten better and better at doing, and like just like Googling and things like this, it's gotten a lot easier for students to just, if you give them just like a math problem or a science problem or a coding problem in it, it's gotten a lot easier for them to just go find that solution with help from AI. And so this kind of thing where they're actually um, submitting some visual artifacts can be really helpful. For math problems, like it can actually be hard to show your work digitally. Like it's often much easier to show it in handwriting and then like snap a picture and upload it to the discussion. And so it's actually, I think, making it easier sometimes for the students when you have them submit their work this way. And then again, like asking students to talk about not just submit their solution, but talk about how they got to that solution. That was, I think, something discussed in like a different, like one of the other instructors in this math webinar talked about giving oral quizzes where their quiz wasn't like submitting the answers. It was more like submitting videos where they explained like the process of getting to the answer. And that is so good for their like cognitive process, being able to articulate the work they're doing. But again, like a good chat GPT deterrent.
I'd never actually been into this one before, but I'd like to point out the student actually used whiteout to fix their math homework, which that's just next level. Like, not me, but anyway, very cool. And then, yeah, Alex put that webinar out. Oh,
Hey,
Nicole Wynn said it was excellent. Go ahead.
Marcus, there was a really good question about with the personal reflection about setting that up for the entire semester within Harmonize. And we can do that. Multi-due dates do not have to be contained within a week, but maybe you want to kind of touch on that real quick.
Yeah, so what we see people do, because they want it to be more like a blog, they will set it up with a due date every week, every 2 weeks, and then it all exists in one spot. And so the student gets notified that, hey, you have a reflection entry coming up type of thing. So all of that reflection is a single spot. And then we have some instructors that actually assess that as part of the final as well. Like, how did your learning process go? So they will actually take the grand result of all of that into the final assessment process and see like, okay, this is a pretty significant part of your grade, but you had to be working on it throughout the semester. I don't want you to try to make up a reflection in the last week. It actually had to be in on time, week by week by week. And so they will do so. And the way that works, I don't know if we have already put out the way to do a private discussion space, but you can do it private between one-on-one with the student as well. Right. What are we at? 20 minutes left. I'm going to spend a little time at the end. Actually, you want to talk about group discussions, Alex, and then at the end, I will go into how do I use AI to help me migrate some of my assessments into this new format. So maybe Alex spend 5 minutes or so on group assignments so we can stay on track, and then we'll show how to kind of help migrate some of these things with AI.
Yeah, that sounds good. So group projects can be another thing that I think that is really good for student learning and growth, but that also happens to be a chat GPT deterrent. When students are working together, they're maybe a little less likely to use AI. And you can even ask them sometimes, or at least let them meet together face to face. If you have them, work together to coordinate sometimes that they're going to meet on like Zoom or Google Meet or something like that, you could ask them to like you submit AI summaries of those meetings as proof that they did them or something like that. So your students are actually like getting together, discussing things, working together. But I think students are just less likely to rely on AI when they're working with other students because they know other students are counting on them.
There'd have to be a group contract that we're all going to cheat together.
Right. Like, yeah. And students are less likely to do that. And having other students to like rely on and be able to ask questions if they do get confused, like helps head off the desire to go to AI too, because they have other people who are in it there with them. But having them, maybe keep a task management document where they're like documenting who's doing what and what their process is. Having collaborative work documents in something like Google Docs, or in Harmonize, you can set up collaborative discussion spaces where you're actually seeing the discussions they're having with one another. Um, Having them reflect at the end on their roles and everyone's roles in the group. These are all good things. And then they take wonderful skills away from this. I'll be the first to admit I hated group projects when I was a student. And then like lo and behold, you're out in the adult world and everything is a group project. You have to work with people. And so like it is one of those things that sometimes I think involves a little bit of pain, but it's like it's the real world. You're gonna go out and you're gonna have series of group projects. That's life. So I think it's something that is great for them, but that is also a ChatGPT deterrent. So yeah, it's great if you have something like Harmonize where you can use um, like small group discussions. Canvas has that feature too, where you can break them into small groups and give them their like private discussion spaces, and yeah, all of that good stuff can really help with the ChatGPT use. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to that. Um, as
No,
far
I mean, it
as
also teaches you to deal with the fact that someone in your group is always going to be the slacker, and that's a life
yes.
skill.
And if
Um,
people are concerned about that, I had good success. I helped an instructor. She had her students like working groups, doing like every 2 weeks, they were doing kind of like a different little project together. And every 2 weeks she gave them the same, like it was like a quiz essentially that had them review the other people in their group and rate the other people in their group on different criteria, and if they wanted to say something about what was happening in the group. And she had like no problems. I think just like everyone being aware that that was a thing that was going to happen regularly seriously helped students pull their own weight. So that can be, if you're concerned about having too many slacker students and the teacher headaches that come with managing group logistics, something like that I think helps a little.
Alex, can you throw out the small group webinar you and I did,
Yeah.
and maybe
Yeah,
grab that
yeah.
URL, because that talks about some of the student facilitation stuff as well that you can use to do group leaders.
It
I
does.
want to call it a comment that was left in the chat, because we keep saying resilient and deterrent, and it's important to know that none of this stuff is foolproof. It was Roberta said, video generation is becoming a thing. Sora coming from ChatGPT, they're generating pretty videos, but there's also this website called HeyGen, where you can give it your face and your voice, and then you can have it use AI written content to make you say whatever you want it to say. So these things are deterrents. We're just trying to make it easier for the student to actually accomplish the learning than it is for them to go through the hoops to cheat. Because people are always going to cheat, right? That's a thing. Like it's been a thing for forever. Can we just make it a little more difficult and do it in a way that is sound from a learning science perspective, so that they're not being drugged through circles that they're going to hate. They're going to be drugged through steps that are actually good for the learning process as well.
Yes, like 100%. I love how you said that, Marcus. I always think about teaching, and the cheating issue, especially if you're teaching writing, because I taught writing. That cheating issue I try to think of as like a locked door keeping an honest person honest issue. Like your locked door is never going to keep everyone from breaking in or breaking out, or however we think about it, but you put just like enough things in place that, like you said, it's almost easier to just do what you're supposed to be doing than to jump through all the hoops with the AI or whatever it is, because cheating has been around a lot longer than AI has. And so make it easier and better to do the learning, and do it in a way, you don't want to do it in a way that's going to impede their learning. I read such a sad thing the other day about a student who was so nervous about their instructor. David, it might have been something you put out on LinkedIn. It was it's a student who got so nervous about the AI use policy the instructor had that they just like they dropped the class. They were like so, and so like that's an example of, if you're relying on these like AI detectors and these super punitive police state methods of control that don't promote good learning, like you can really shut down the learning experience for students.
For sure. All right, so let's talk about how to, as an instructor or as an instructional designer, how to take an existing assessment and move it over into some of these formats, because you're probably like, oh, I'm going to have to write instructions on that type of thing. I know we're asking our students not to use it, but I'm going to put on my hypocrite hat for a second and be like, we can totally use this. Just like you can eventually teach your students ethical use of AI, there are ways to do this stuff ethically, and you're welcome to cite it when you do it. But I thought I would walk through just an example of what this looks like. I'm going to do this in Harmonize, but you can go straight to any of the AI tools and work with them to help you write these things. To where I'm going to say, let's actually build an assessment. And you can say, for example, what was Robert Frost's poem? It was Road Less Traveled, Path Less Taken.
The
What was
road not taken.
The Road Not Taken. So we're going to analyze Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not the Rad, The Road Not Taken. And we're going to add in reflection steps on their critical thinking. So you can put things like this into ChatGPT. If you're doing it out there, I recommend like specifying a Bloom's taxonomy level, if you know what that means, or having it build sample prompts at different Bloom's taxonomy levels so you understand that. Give it your learning objective, because I could put a learning objective in here and AI will help line those up for you. So it can shoulder some of the writing for you. You need the critical thinking of what do you want your students to learn and what are the learning outcomes. But it can get you 80% of the way there for actually building the activity for your students. And then once again, you can tweak it. So in this case, it's setting up a analysis of the poem with a reflect and discussion step on it. And then I can go back and forth with AI to tweak that or have it pick a different strategy. Treat this as a conversation with AI when you're going in. Be like, hate that discussion prompt. Give me another one. You can do that here in RUI. You can do that in ChatGPT or Gemini or any of them, and just treat it like an unpaid intern where there's no cost to have it actually do the things for you and see what it comes up. Now it's breaking people into teams, and you could be like, don't want teamwork type of thing. And so you can just have this conversation with it. Teamwork, that's not enough of an improvement. As that's hard to manage. Got to give it at least a sentence or two so it's smart enough to know what you're actually after. But you can have it, get it close enough that you can then review it, edit it, and bring it into your LMS so that it's then available for you to be able to build on. I can almost see Alex reading this to see if you liked what it did. Is that what you're doing there?
I'm reading this and I like it. I like that it wants them relating it to their personal life. This is one that like students enjoy doing that also kind of helps with ChatGPT deterrence. Although it's fun when ChatGPT makes up a personal life for itself. That's always entertaining too.
True.
But yeah, and then yeah, the way it's having them, highlight strategies they believe are effective. And you could totally then like, if you were still in the prompt thing, you could be like, oh, I like this, but change the last step, share your insights, change that to a video reflection or something like that too, so that they were doing the final step as a video or something like that. I like this prompt. This is a cool one.
Every time I use your essays and your ideas, I can see you switch into like reading and being like, how'd it do? I taught that for 3 years in college. How did it do? Right, and then you also you can use ChatGPT to build rubrics now. So something else to think about when you're having ChatGPT build the rubric. Don't just ask it to build the rubric in its entirety. Much like we're talking about with the students, have it pull out from the prompt that you've given it. Have it pull out like what it thinks the main 4 things that should be in the rubric are, so you can critique those before you go into the full rubric generation step. So that think of it as, once again, you are working through the process with it. You're just not having it create an end thing. You are reviewing and analyzing, is this what you actually want, before you then walk it into actually creating the rubric for you type of thing. So if you don't do this in Harmonize, we force this, but if you do this out on AI, make sure that you're walking through those 2 steps, because having it make sure that what it thought were the main 4 themes are what you agree with is going to make the end rubric way better. If you do this out in AI, you actually have to copy the rubric into your LMS. We take that step for you, but you can have it help build these instructional materials so that when you actually have this published thing for your students, now you've taken an assessment you've been doing for years, you've brought it in, you've had a little more reflection, or maybe you asked for the outline, or maybe you asked for a mind map, or whatever it is. For them to be able to work through, complete with rubric, ready for them to participate in. So when you're thinking about transitioning your assignments, you don't have to do this from scratch. Like, you can take an existing assignment, paste it into AI, and be like, add some reflection. boom, done, paste it back in to your LMS type of thing as well. So AI is your assistant in this. Even if you're not including AI use for your students, which we talked about earlier, I think this is a great one to be like, tell your students, like, especially if you're doing an AI driven assignment where it's like, I want you to use AI to do X, Y, Z in this assignment, but not these other three things. I did the same thing when I built the assignment here. I had these ideas, I gave it to it. This is how I used AI to do it. We're in an AI world, so being humble and admit that you're doing this as well while you're encouraging your students to do it when safe, when ethical, when it doesn't change your learning outcomes or your learning goals is a great way to go as well. Okay. Have about 10 minutes left. I wanted to leave some time for questions to come in. I know we covered tons of material. We just wanted to fly through all the examples we've been hearing and brainstorming with so you guys can think about them and figure out which one of those are pertinent. Like I said, logistics wise, we are going to be sharing the recording out. When we get it turned into a blog, we'll share that out as well so that you can have it in more written format if you want to share it around, because not a lot of people like to listen to Alex and I speak for 50 minutes as a way to learn. Maybe they want to scan and read stuff as you go through it all. So I see a couple things coming in chat. Looks like, David, did you already answer, or do we need to?
So Smita asked a really cool question, although I suspect I was just typing out a response. Smita, I think you should reach out to us at support@harmonizelearning.com. Here, I'm going to reach in. If you reach out via that email address, I will be the one who takes that question, because that's totally a very instructional designing question. Or I'll make a note here to respond to you, Smita, through support. This is a cool question. How do you have the same thing appear in the module each week and maybe build on the instructions? And I have some ideas. If you're doing it in Harmonize, you can have the same Harmonize assignment appear in multiple modules. The idea that the instructions are kind of building, there are a couple of ways we could handle that. You can modify the instructions each week, to add on what the new prompt is. You could also consider adding a little context in the Canvas editor. So there are some things we could noodle with, but the short answer is yes, you can do this, because Harmonize just lives in a Canvas assignment, and you can have the same assignment live in multiple modules. So if you're wanting them to do a journal entry each week, you can have that appear in each module, and then either add new information through your posts there, which everyone will see. Even if you have it set private, everyone will see posts you make. Or you can sort of noodle with the instructions. You want me to share?
I'm going to interrupt because you totally said you weren't going to answer
I
this.
said I wasn't going to answer it, but I did. So these are some options. Nicole, I'll add you to the list, and I'll shoot you guys both an email.
You
but
triggered
yes,
her instructional design thing. It's like, oh wait, let me.
I knew I shouldn't, but I wanted to, because these are my favorite kinds of questions. So I'll send you guys an extended answer to this. But yeah, it's a cool tool for private journaling.
Okay, so Karina asked about peer review with the Abby wants your answer too as well. The peer review stuff, I'm going to hold on that one for just a minute, because that way, if we don't have any non-harmonized questions, we can then talk about harmonized stuff towards the end. But I want to see if there are any non-harmonized questions for those that are not harmonized users, and talking about assessment, because I don't want to drag people into here's how you do it with Harmonize if they're not harmonized users. I guess to that end, if you want to be a Harmonize user, we offer free semesters. You're welcome to reach out to us, harmonizelearning.com. David can toss out the URL. We can set up a free semester for your school to get some instructors in. Obviously, that's me putting my sales hat somewhere around here back on and being happy for you to become customers. So before I go in and answer peer review questions, any other assessment specific or ChatGPT or AI specific questions you want us to delve on? Otherwise, the folks that don't use Harmonize may not want to hang out for this part.
Marcus, while we wait for that to come in, I'm also going to send out a link for anyone, whether they're Harmonized users or not. We have a new video. If you want to talk about that a little bit, so that they can interact and can be a learning tool or just a exploring tool. Yeah,
this is something we're trying. So if you're an instructor with Harmonize or not, we have this new, we're using this software called Arcade, which if you haven't explored it, it's awesome. It allows you to do software walkthroughs of things and how to do them. And Alex has been building out tutorials with it. And Oh, the one David put is actually on our website. It'll give you an overview of what Harmonize is. Alex, can you also grab the instructor help center one that you built that is way more deep in the weeds? It'll walk you through a lot of these things on how to actually understand how to do them so you can sort of self-explore. The one David put out is a great one of just what is Harmonize overall. How do we think about ethical AI? I've touched on a couple of like our AI coaching and rubric gen and those things. We didn't delve into those, but you can see what those are there as well. All right, so let's talk about peer review as it exists today. So for everyone who's using Harmonize, you're, I'm sure, familiar with multiple due dates, one post, two comments type of thing, or however many of those deadlines you want. What we are seeing people do with respect to peer review, but also with respect to this process, is that you can add as many due dates as you want. So if you're building an assignment, let's call it in private mode, and you want the students to all submit their private work, and you want them to submit two things 4 days apart. First post is you want your brainstorm, your outline, and your initial thesis statement, and then 5 days later, I want your final paper as you're coming in. And then you want to open that up and be like, okay, now we're going to make this more public now that you all have your work in place. And I'm going to ask you to go using the multiple due dates. I'm going to say, go comment on 2 other people's work. Here's the guides of what I'm asking you to do. If those guides of what you're asking them to do were actually included in your instructions, our rubric generation would have picked those up as a thing that you're asking students to do. So what we're seeing people do is couple the multiple due dates of building the work with a rubric that actually contains what you're asking your students to do from a critique perspective, and then turn on or leave on the AI coach that uses the instructor's rubric so that it is telling the students, hey, you didn't do a great job of constructive feedback for your fellow students. Take a look at that. There's much room for improvement. So they can sort of get some real-time feedback in their critique process to be able to then make sure they're leaving thorough comments. They're doing a good job of critique because many students don't know how to do peer critique. That's as it exists today. So today, if you were to go leave this meeting and try that, that's what we would recommend setting up. Set up a one post to submit the work, 2 comments. You can leave it visible to everyone if you want them to see the initial posts, and then put into the rubric and turn on the rubric coach what you're expecting from both phases of that. What do you want in the initial assignment, plus what do you want from the peer critique, and then let the AI coach kind of tell them what that is so that by the time you step in, you're reviewing the auto-graded stuff because they got the work done. You'll be able to see all of that, but you also see all the feedback that was given by the AI coach as well.
Can I add 2 things, Marcus? One is that one of the cool things you can already do, if you have them copy and paste their drafts into the body of the post, you can enforce minimum word counts, which I think is great because students are very prone to turning in partial drafts and maybe you want them to turn into a full draft. The minimum word counts are great for that. Also, Karina asked specifically about how to set up in pairs. If you're in Canvas or Blackboard, I believe you can use small, or is it just there are groups in Blackboard. If you're in Canvas or Blackboard, you can do small groups and put them in pairs. And I'll drop some info in the chat about that. And then they will only see each other's posts. If you're not in one of those LMSs, if you're in D2L or Moodle, what you can do is go in and create a post for each pair. And like, okay, you are on Canvas, so you'll be fine. You can connect to your Canvas group set. But in case anyone here had a similar question, you can create posts essentially at the beginning and like put the students' names as the topics, and they just know that that's where they're going to go post their work and reply to each other. So
cool. The thing we're building for this summer is a much more formalized layer on top of this, so you don't have to set up all of these things individually. We're just setting them all up for you, where it's like, okay, we're expecting your students to turn in some work. Then we're going to go into a peer review phase, and we are going to handle the assignments of the people for peer review, so you don't have to try to match the students up and worry that someone didn't get it. We're doing it real time for you. We're adding AI coaching for both the assignment and the peer review. We're putting all of that as an auto-graded process for you, putting it into SpeedGrader for review. So kind of a lot of the pieces that Alex was describing there will be easier to set up, and some flaws in what she described today, like the 2 comments that we're requiring. It doesn't say comment on. There's no way for us to enforce comment on 2 different students, and I want your comment to be targeted to their work. You could have left 2 comments on 1 piece of student work. So we're going to be adding in that more of an enforcement mechanism to be able to lay things out. The goal, we'll be having a sharing session on that coming up in probably another month or so of here's what we're building, everybody get ready, here's what's coming out in summer so you can play with it over the summer and get it into a fall class and try it out. And it will just be included in your Harmonize license when you're going through all of it. what do we have? 2 minutes left.
Nicole had a cool question that I know you actually had content prepped for, which is any assignments where you might ask students to use AI in specific ways,
Yeah,
sharing their process or
the only
something?
thing we touched on this, Nicole, was more about documenting the process, like when you are actually having them work on it, that you are having them share their ChatGPT links of what they did, share the artifacts of what they were actually working on, so that whatever you're asking them to build, they can do so. Like, here's what I did from ChatGPT. Here's the outline I built from it. Here's the first draft of what I was working on, so that you're having them document the process along the way. There is
Yep.
amazing stuff happening out there with AI assessments. I'm going to highlight a few that I just thought was fascinating. We're going to present at one of the Mississippi conferences with an instructor who's using AI chatbots to have her students have a conversation with one of their body parts. She's in an anatomy and physiology class, and so she's having them have a conversation with them. And she gave them the prompt of, like, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to pretend to be the liver, and talk to me about how you work. And I'm going to ask questions about when you work and when you don't work. And so she actually had them engage with AI to be able to have a conversation, talking to the liver as if it were, what's that, anthropomorphized, if it was actually a personality type thing. And I was like, that's amazing. Other examples I've had, someone brought up the image gen and the video gen stuff that AI is doing. One of the instructors in her personal introductions used AI to actually have the students build a visual avatar of what they wanted themselves to look like and represent in the class. So they're not having to expose themselves or their personality. Some people are shy that way. She's like, build the avatar of you as it relates to the content that we're going to build. We're going to do that as an introduction so that we get these pictures of how you see yourself interacting with the content. So some students, as a science class, some students were like frustrated and scared of the class. Some students were like, had on the white lab coat of like scientists, so you could get a feel for like how they actually saw themselves in relation to the content. And they were doing that with AI image generators. And I was like, that is so cool as well. So
Marcus, I wanted to add, I did a teaching foreign language webinar, and Bethany Thomas over at Victor Valley, and this is way more simple than what you were talking about, but they use a visual image of saying AI okay on an assignment or AI not okay, and just putting that on every assignment. And so the students know, and especially like with a foreign language class, grammar softwares that will help with even foreign language vocabulary and things like that, whether or not it was okay to use those in those assignments or not, just that visual aid.
yeah, there's this gentleman out on called Leon Furs who has an AI assessment scale, which I think is great for this as well. I'm going to put this out into the chat. And now that I've gone through my LinkedIn and found it, I can reshare it. And it does kind of what David is talking about, but it breaks it down into what are the different ways that AI can be used. So is this a level 1 no AI assignment? Is this a full AI exploration? Are you using it for planning? And then it outlines what it is. So there's this agreed contract up front of like, this is what I am expecting from you as you use AI in this as well. So this is an interesting thing. I just put it out in the chat for you to be able to take a look at. He's constantly developing this. He's quite good. He's not an AI Kool-Aid guy. He's very, very critical of AI. So you can kind of trust him to be able to be doing the right thing. See, Lori has a question. I'm concerned about students getting a singular point of view answer from AI and running with that. Any suggestions for building prompts that produce answers that require the students to evaluate and assess multiple answers like they would do in a more traditional content search or literature review? I think this is where you can give them a prompt library where you explicitly say exactly what you said, and AI will do that for them. So you can be like, I want you to start with this prompt. Hey, AI, you are a professional in this field who are representing multiple points of view. I now want the student to be able to have a conversation with it. And so you can tell them, students, this is why I'm doing this. I'm worried about this. Here's what I want you to achieve. And you can just tell AI to behave exactly the way you want it to behave. And if they start with that prompt, it will drift and do different things, but it will more or less stay true to that, so that you can just play with it yourself a little bit to refine it, but give them a 2 or 3 sentence prompt that they're going to paste in to start with. And it will act as that. Like, for example, I'm going to Portugal for my 25th wedding anniversary. I tell AI I want it to quiz me on Portuguese language and restaurants, and I want it to critique my language when I write it back, or I want it to do it in voice mode as a translator, and it will do that So you can actually just give them 1 or 2 sentences written in just plain English of what you want it to do as well.
I was going to add to like some of those things like we would normally maybe expect to happen behind the scenes, like, right? Like we assign them to go do a content search or literature review, and then like behind the scenes, they're evaluating and stuff. But like making that be the assignment itself by like, you know, having an annotated bibliography where they need to like compare and contrast the sources, or even having the final assessment require that kind of deep consideration of different points of view rather than a singular point of view. One of my old essays that ChatGPT does not do well with is one where I asked my students to essentially simultaneously argue for 2 different interpretations for one poem, based on like different readings of the text, and then at the end like either synthesize or decide on one and explain why. And like for whatever reason, the AI is not good with it. Like it just does not do well with it. And so I guess I'd have to check. Maybe it's gotten better, and like asterisk, it's always getting better. But that like I want you to simultaneously sustain and consider like and argue for 2 viewpoints, and then ultimately like find where you land in that conversation, and having that be the assignment was a thing that seemed pretty resilient. So
Yeah, I wanted to highlight an app that I use sometimes when I'm trying to check my assumptions. This Elicit app here, free to sign up for. It's an AI search of research papers that allows you to go see, are your assumptions correct, and is there research backing those? And so you can ask it whatever you want, and it will start churning up research papers with citations and such for you to dig in and read the actual research. If you're in a higher level class, this could be something that you use with your students. I find it super valuable because a lot of times when we're building things like peer review, like we need to know what does the research say on it, and in every little nuance, it's not a, oh, let's go spend 4 weeks researching now. It's like, wait, type it in and be like research paper. Okay, there's enough nuance here. We need to go research more. Or look, all 12 of those papers agreed that this was a good thing. Fantastic. We can move on from here, type of thing. So this app that I'm sharing is called elicit.com, and I can work with doing. And there was another one that's similar to it. I forget what it's called, but there's a couple of them that are cropping up to be able to do research paper analysis. Lots of fun stuff happening with AI. It does cause us lots of headaches in higher ed. So that was the goal here. Assessments, how do you modify your assessments? So as you're going through it all. So Nicole shared out another one. There's tons of good resources being put out. I shared the one assessment scale. 2 other people put out assessment scales. Guy gave one from his school. Nicole gave another one. There's a bunch of great research out there, a bunch of things happening, trying to figure out how to mitigate all of this as well. So yeah, keep on sharing resources. Any last questions? I can hang out a little more time. We are 6 minutes over. I know some people have been slowly disappearing, but we can talk about fun stuff in AI all day long. Although eventually we probably should get back to the rest of our work. But any other questions? Happy to field them. Going once, going twice. Awesome. So thanks everybody. So we will be sharing out the recording. Like I said, we'll go. Nicole told us to go finish peer review. Alex and I have a meeting 30 minutes from now where we are continuing to dig into peer review. So we will go continue to build that. Awesome. So yeah, and if you are a Harmonize user and you have any questions and you want to dig into some of these ID things, we love those questions. They are way more fun than how did I clicky in the interface. Alex, given the please don't ask me to clicky in the interface, ask me an instructional design question. So support@harmonizelearning.com. We all are on that. We all chime in. The people who build the product are on that. So you're going to get a pretty smart answer, or at least we hope you're going to get a pretty smart answer. And then you can run with it. So don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Thanks everybody. We're going to wrap it up and have a good time.